Like I said in the last video, I've already got the base cabinets all done. There's not a whole lot to them. End panels on each end, plus the bottom panel is full. It goes through. These other divider panels sit on the bottom panel. The bottom panel itself sits on a base that I built in place. The countertop itself is going to be porcelain, and to support that I have 2 layers of plywood, 1 layer of 3/4, and then another layer of 1/2 inch glued right on top of that. Right after I finished building the base cabinets, I trimmed the window. This is 3/4 inch plywood on the inside and solid maple on the face. You'll notice that I didn't miter the corners, and that was on purpose. It'll match the look of the frame and panel doors that will be in the rest of the kitchen. These are some of the first drawers that I made. This one here is for trash and fits these plastic buckets. The plastic buckets are the right size for these normal shopping bags. One above is, normal stuff you put in there. And then the cutlery drawer here, and these all are full extension like that. And these over here, this is the biggest drawer in the kitchen. This is for pots. It's about 11.5 inches deep. I don't know, around 32 inches wide and 21 inches from front to back. And again, full extension. Ones above are just the same except shallower. I just finished making this pair, and this one's more of a roll-out tray. Stand mixer, meat grinder fit on there. And then the one above is actually for bread. I had this in my old kitchen. It's a drawer specifically to put bread in. I made it nice and deep, and of course it's the full depth as well. I've already built 2 uppers and installed them. This one here and the one above the range hood, that one's much simpler. This one has 3 shelves. These are just 3/4 inch plywood. They sit on shelf pins, and there's shelf pin holes in the side of the cabinet. I've got more uppers to make, and I'll cover those in an upcoming video. There's not a whole lot to these. These are 3/4 inch plywood. Someone took exception, a couple of people actually pointed out in the last video that this is not plywood. Well, everybody that does this kind of stuff calls this kind of thing plywood, regardless of what the core material is. This is particle board core, and a quality about this is that it tends to stay nice and flat and straight, whereas veneer core, which a lot of people think is actually better, tends to warp more readily, and it can also get wavy over time. It depends upon how dry this substrate is when they assemble the sheet. I still don't have the face frame put on here yet. What I want to do is get all of the upper cabinet boxes themselves made first. Then I can machine all the parts for the face frame at the same time, so I'll wind up with a consistent thickness throughout the room and I won't have any mismatches. Also, doing all that at the same time will save a significant amount of time for setup and so on. Well, it's time to get on with what I want to do in this video, and that's to install these 2 drawers. These are the ones that I made in the last video. In the meantime, I gave them 3 coats of water-based polyurethane, so they're ready to use now. I'm going to take this drawer out so it won't be in my way. Whoa, that's heavy. Cast iron frying pans. I've made a jig right here, a very simple jig actually. And what that does is it lines up with the mark that I've already got there, and it squares to the face of the cabinet, and I'll hold it in place, and I'll take my rubber mallet and I'll just pound on the screws that I've got partially sticking out the other side. And what that will do is it'll make places for me to drill pilot holes to mount the drawer slide on. It's as simple as that. Now, if you want more details on this jig and how I made it, I've got a video on my main channel. Yeah, the jig makes a nice dimple right where I need to drill. It'll guide the bit. Okay, with the pilot holes drilled, I can get a screw in. Now these ones that the jig lines up with are slotted, so I got adjustment back and forth if I need it. Now the jig is reversible because these screws are in the middle. So just flip it over and use it on this short divider I've got here. And since this is a little bit fragile, I'm not going to pound it, I'm just going to press it in. The jig will actually mark the hole locations for this part of the slide, but it marks these vertical slots here, which I really don't like to use. I prefer to draw a line right on the side of the cabinet using my little combination square. I'll just use the slide itself lined up and drill the holes where they need to be drilled. This can be tricky to begin with. You gotta kind of push hard on them to get them latching, but then after that they're really smooth. And this looks good. The only thing I want to do is put a screw right here as a temporary pull. I mentioned in the last video that I would be doing more than installing the drawer, and I decided what I'm going to do with one of them, and that's to use it to store the spices that I use most often. I buy them in this certain size bottle, 2 different sizes actually. So as you can see in the picture, I actually laid them on the edge of the countertop and lined them up with the size of the drawer that I have, the depth and the length, and I worked out the size that the ramps need to be, and I made a mock-up. Art, can you give me the mock-up there?
Yeah, sure, John. Curious how this works.
Thanks. Anyway, they go in the drawer. There's going to be 4 of them, and they're going to be longer than this, and they'll go in the drawer like this, one after the other, and then the spice bottles will sit right down on top of them. Well, I've already got the parts cut out of 1/2-inch plywood. They're a fairly acute angle on the front, so I had to cut those with them up against the fence on the table saw, and a 45-degree angle at the back. And when they go together, they will sit down flat on the inside of the drawer. To clamp these together, I'm just going to use masking tape, a strip of it across the miter. I'll put the pieces tight together. And then just smooth the strip of tape on, and I can flip it over, put some glue in the joint, and then close it up. And then I'll take another piece of tape and use that to hold it closed until the glue dries. I gave them about an hour to dry, and I pulled the tape off. They look pretty good. I'm going to sand over the front edge here a little bit. And then what I need to do is I need to size them correctly. I intentionally made these bigger than they need to be so that I can get them to fit in the drawer nice and tight and not attached to the drawer in any way, so that if in the future I decide to do something else with this drawer, I can just pull these out and it won't damage it. I'm going to trim these on the table saw, but because my miter slot actually lines up with the edge of this thing, I've got a scrap piece of plywood to put underneath it to set it on so I can make the cut. Okay, I got them all trimmed and they fit in there nicely. I rounded over the edge slightly also. Slip that in. I've got one other thing I need to do with them before I'll call them finished, and that's to give them a couple of coats of clear polyurethane, just the same as I did on the inside of the drawer. Then I can start using it.